Hello, welcome back to Lady Lovestead Reads. My name is Jessica, and this is my video where I share with you my best reads of 2024. My baby bunnies turned 1 year old a couple days ago, and I just gave them some treats, and I'm still just kind of basking in the glow that is their cuteness. Gosh, they're so adorable. They're like incredibly cute. Anyway, if you're new here, my name is Jessica, and I typically read books that fall into one of two categories. Y'all know this drill. On one hand, I read books that are dark, twisted, depraved. On the other hand, I read books that are cozy, lighthearted, and whimsical, because I do tend to read some books that are dark. I highly recommend that you check trigger warnings before picking up any of the books that I talk about. I don't share trigger warnings in my videos because I do think that they are spoilery, but I recommend utilizing Storygraph to check out the triggers for any books you might have concerns about. I rate my books on a 5-point star scale. 5 stars is like best of the best. Anything that is a 3-star or higher, I do recommend. And then lastly, I will be filming this video in separate filming sessions. So you're going to see outfit changes, lighting changes, angle changes. I'm sorry if that bothers you, but this method is what works best for me filming these kinds of videos. I debated about how I wanted to film my best of video, whether I wanted to do it by genre or some other way. And what I've done consistently year over year is just to tell you the books that I read that were the best of the year in the order that I read them. So I think that's what I'll do again this year. I did want to start off with some honorable mentions. And I'll share with you the book, a little bit about it, and I'm not going to share my rating because a lot of times my rating doesn't always match whether or not it's the best book of the year, because sometimes some of my favorite books of the year and the books that stick with me throughout the year are books that get like a 3-star rating. So I'm just going to share the title, the author, and a little bit about why I like the book. So first, in the honorable mention category, these are books that were really, really good. When I looked at my list of books read for the year, I saw the titles and I went, oh yeah, that was good. But they weren't books that immediately came to mind as like, oh, I loved that, right? A very subjective way of rating and reviewing and categorizing books, I know, but I really believe that reading is subjective and we have to be honest to our true reading experiences if we are to actually give an accurate representation of a book, right? Because nobody reads a book from a purely objective standpoint. And so when I follow reviewers, I want reviewers who are really honest in what their experience was. And I understand that it's always going to be a subjective thing. And hopefully you understand that as well as I go through these books. So, honorable mentions. Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too by Johnny Sun. This is one of the first books that I read in the year. And this is a graphic novel. And it's about this little alien that comes to Earth and just observes things. And it's essentially philosophy as told from this alien. And it's so cute, it's so thoughtful, it's thought-provoking, the art is fun, and it has all these little animal characters in it that are just adorable. I really liked it. I hope to reread it at some point. The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This is an adult celebrity memoir. It is Britney's story about how she was, basically her whole life was controlled by her father, and he was not good to her. And it tells her story. It tells her story of growing up in the limelight, of her celebrity status, of her music career, and of her nightmare experience. Oh, I forget the word. It's not survivorship, but what is it? Where essentially her father legally was able to make every single decision for her. And she had no control of her life. And wow. Powerful. Something that I really liked about this book is that the voice was so uniquely Britney. Britney doesn't claim to be a super smart person, and her writing reflects that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. it's so beautifully Britney. It's so true to who she is. And it's how you know that, yes, this is her story and this is her telling the story, because the language isn't complex. The concepts aren't complex. She doesn't address any big philosophical ideas. She talks a little bit about her spirituality and things like that. The message is simple. It's straightforward. It's to the point. It's Britney. And that's what I really loved about that one. Third honorable mention is The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. This is an adult literary fiction, and I love Irish literature. So this is an Irish piece set in Ireland, and it's about really complex, messy relationships between a woman whose best friend is a gay man, and they both love the same married man, and how complicated that gets. And it touches on the issues of like pregnancy and abortion and things like that in Ireland, which is a really complex issue. And I thought it was really well done. One of the better literary fictions that I read in 2024. Let's go ahead and chat about my favorite books of the year, and I'm just going to share them in the order that I read them. I'll probably do 5 books in a filming session if you need to know that. So first is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. This is adult nonfiction, and it's Christian nonfiction. It's about basically recovering from burnout. So at the start of 2024, I was still in this phase of trying to recover from burnout that I had experienced at the end of 2023. I was severely burned out. So a lot of the books and things I was reading at that point focused on burnout. So this does focus on that, and it focuses on it from the perspective of like a Christian lifestyle. It was really, really important in my burnout recovery, and I still refer back to it and reread parts of it to this day. John Mark Comer has become one of my all-time favorite Christian authors. I have another one of his books on this list, actually. So if you are of the Christian persuasion, I do recommend pretty much anything that this man writes. This one got 5 stars. Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This was another 5-star read. This is adult literary horror, and it's also about burnout. So it personifies burnout as this black cloud that follows the main character around everywhere. She works in Silicon Valley in the tech industry. And it really just talks about that capitalistic urge for us to work and work and work and work and never ever take a break, and how meaningless that cycle can become. And it's so fantastic. I'm really hoping to reread it here soon. It's been calling out to me to reread. The cover is gorgeous too. Don't you think it's gorgeous? This was my favorite fiction of the year. The Puddleduck series by Della Galton. This is an adult contemporary cozy series, like cozy romance series about a veterinarian, and she lives in the country and she helps her grandmother run this farm where she rescues animals. And it's like a slice of life series, and I loved this one because in some of my most stressful parts of 2024, I just escaped into the Puddleduck universe. And it's so soothing, and it's so whimsical, and not like unrealistic either. It's just it became a safe space for me in 2024. Do I think that everybody's gonna love this series and rave about it? No. But it did something very important for me psychologically this year, and so it absolutely will be one of my favorite book series. And a big thank you to my friend Cajun, who suggested this series to me. Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This is an adult horror. I think it's a novella too. I can't remember. It's a fairly short read. But it's about this woman who has a child, and the child dies. So she takes a piece of his lung and keeps it, and the lung grows into this little monster that she calls Monstrilio. And it's basically a coming of age novel about Monstrilio. And while you would think that that's kind of horrifying, Monstrilio is actually so precious. Like, he's so precious. I just loved and adored him. And the horrifying parts are the way that people react to him. That was a book that really stuck with me. And in fact, when I adopted frogs this past fall, I named one of my frogs Monstrilio. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is an adult literary fiction. Some say it's a modern classic, and it's dark academia, considered like a foundational dark academia text. It's about a group of college students who murder one of their friends, and it basically starts out the story with you knowing that they murder him, but then it goes back in time and shows you the lead up to the murder, and then the fallout. And it's a mess, and it's intelligent, thought-provoking, and it will provoke some intense emotions and feelings, rage, anger, sadness, joy, you name it. It's a longer book, but it's well worth it. Now, for this one, I do have to put in the caveat here. There's some unnecessary racism that happens in this that doesn't fully get addressed, specifically around people who are from the Middle East and people who are Black. Just putting that disclaimer out there, if this is a book you're interested in, it just seems to come out of nowhere and then doesn't get addressed. So that is a bit problematic. And know that going into it if it's something you're interested in reading. Stargazer by Laurie Petrou. This is an adult sort of literary thriller, and it's about an obsessive friendship. So these two young women go to a college in Canada, and this university feels like a summer camp because it's like set in the woods and the classrooms are cabins. It just sounds really, really cool. But one of the girls is very wealthy. Well, I mean, they're both very wealthy, but one of them, her mother is a famous fashion designer, and they have this cabin that is across the lake from the university. So the two girls live together in this cabin. And when I say cabin, I mean it's like a mansion cabin kind of thing, like very decadent. So they live together, and then they go to the university together, and they have this just obsessive friendship. And one of the girls studies art, and the other one, I believe, is studying literature. It just really gets into what happens when friendships get to a point of being where you don't know where you end and the other person begins. Like, these women are so enmeshed with each other, so codependent with each other, like so mind melded. And it just gets into like how toxic and unhealthy that can be. And it's such a good book. I loved it. I would consider it dark academia, even though there's no like secret societies or anything like that. It's dark and it's set in an academic setting. And if you like stories about wealthy people, if you like stories about toxic female friendships, lots of discussions in here about art, what it means to be an artist, what the purpose of art is. Just really loved this book. Bookshops and Bonedust by Travis Baldree. This is my first taste of like cozy fantasy. I guess technically not my first taste. I read Flower Heart as a buddy read with my friend Jasper, and we both DNF'd it. It just wasn't very well written. So technically it's my second attempt at trying out cozy fantasy, and I really liked this. So Bookshops and Bonedust is set in a fantasy world with like trolls and magical creatures, and like there's no humans, right? Everybody's some sort of a creature. And this warrior ends up in this small town and is injured, so they can't fight in the battles anymore. So while they're recovering from their injuries, they take a job at a bookstore, and the bookstore is failing, so they're coming up with all of these ideas on how to make the bookstore more successful. And it's so cozy and sweet, and I loved these characters. I'm honestly a little bummed out because the next book, which is Legends and Lattes, is set in a different town, and I don't know if the characters from Bookshops and Bonedust will even be in Legends and Lattes, which honestly breaks my heart because especially Fern, the bookshop owner, I just fell in love with Fern. Like, the characters in this totally have my heart. I'm going to be really sad if we don't get to see them again in Legends and Lattes. But I very much enjoyed this cozy adult high fantasy. And if that's a genre that you're interested in, check it out. I haven't read Legends and Lattes. I plan to in this year in 2025. That was the book that originally put Travis Baldree on the map. But I absolutely love the prequel, which is Bookshops and Bonedust. The Djinn Waits 100 Years by Shubnum Khan. This is an adult, again, kind of a literary horror, and it's also historical in that it follows a family legacy. So it's set in this house, and I forget what the house's name, it's like Akbar or something. And this house was originally like this beautiful, sprawling, gorgeous, lush mansion. And then it ends up getting subdivided into apartments. And so there's multiple timelines here. We start in the timeline that's the current timeline, where a man and his daughter are moving in to one of the apartments, and she is haunted by her dead twin. And it's just, this is just so well done. Like, this is the kind of horror that I love, in that it's so thoughtful and so full of meaning, and so full of like discussing big ideas through the use of certain horror tropes. Like, the tropes aren't there just to be scary. They're there to discuss larger issues and to tell a bigger story. I knew nothing about this book going into it. I had just read the synopsis and thought that, oh, that sounds interesting. It blew me away. I am so excited to read more by Shubnum Khan. The writing was exquisite. The characters were fully fleshed out. And like I said, like, the use of some of those horror elements were not there just to be spoopy and scary, but they were really there to tell a larger story, not just about the characters, the families, and the family legacy, but about just like life in general. It was just so, so good. It's Not You by Dr. Ramana Durvasula. This is a book about dealing with people who have narcissistic personalities. Now, I'm doing a lot more learning about narcissism, sociopathy, psychopathy, and other things. The cluster B disorders, if you will, if you're familiar with the DSM. And it's shifting a little bit how I am thinking about narcissism in ways that are a little bit different from what Dr. Ramana talks about in this book. So as I've learned more, my perspectives have changed a little bit. Now, it's not going to change how I handle interacting with people with narcissistic personalities. I think that Dr. Ramana's strategies in this book are top tier and exactly what you need to do to protect yourself when you are dealing with people with a narcissistic personality. And that's exactly what the book is about. So it's about how do you cope with people with this personality type, and I am calling it a personality type. Because unless they have gone to a psychologist and been formally diagnosed, we cannot say that a person has narcissistic personality disorder. But if they exhibit certain kinds of behaviors, we can say, you know, they have a personality type that leans towards narcissism. And the point of this book is like, how do we cope with that? How do we live in a way that's healthy? How do we make decisions about, hello cats, how we interact with people who are within that kind of personality type or engaging in those kinds of behaviors even. And that stuff I am totally on board with. It gave me so many tools to work with. I think I will include this in my series that I'm doing on books that have helped me change my life and become a healthier person. I am working on a video series on this, and I just wrapped up filming my last part of the first installment, so stay tuned for that. This book isn't in that first video, but it's going to be in a future video. Anyway, yeah, I find those strategies really helpful. Having learned what I have learned since reading this book, I'm a little on the fence about how Dr. Ramana describes people who have narcissistic behaviors. She describes them in quite a demonizing way, and I'm a little on the fence about that. But I think as people who have to learn how to cope with it, sometimes thinking about them in a demonizing way is the first step we have to take to get out of a situation. You know what I mean? And not saying that you have to continue thinking about people in that way, but sometimes we have to take steps to unhook ourselves from those kinds of relationships. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent now, but this was a really good book if you want to learn more about strategies you can use to deal with people who have narcissistic tendencies, which is so many people. and it's going to be people you meet in every area of your life. So I do recommend this book for that. How to Keep House When Drowning by Casey Davis. This is a very short book about exactly what it sounds like. Home maintenance and like housekeeping strategies specifically aimed toward people who are neurodivergent in some way. And the book is written in a way to be friendly to neurodivergent brains, and that it's just short little chunks of information. You can read it, you can put it down and digest it. And she gives you some good strategies. I think my favorite strategy from this book that I have applied in my own housekeeping habits that I'm trying to build is to do this thing where first you pick up trash, then you pick up dishes, then you pick up clothes, then you put things back that have a place, and you put the things that don't have a place in a box to take care of later. And it's just a way to do like a really quick clean where you focus on like one layer at a time. And so there are strategies like that in this book, and it's very short, and it talks a lot about like kind of disconnecting morality from housekeeping. Like if you have a messy house, it doesn't mean you're a morally wrong person or anything like that. It means that you're struggling in some way, and that's okay because you're human. So it talks a lot about some of that cognitive and emotional load that we carry if we're not awesome at housekeeping, and how to disconnect some of that thinking, and so that we have a more balanced perspective about housekeeping, and then gives you strategies on how to do better in certain things. I did find it really helpful, and I think it's a good starting point if you do struggle with housekeeping. Will give you some actionable steps. Like sometimes books on this kind of thing are just like, you should clean your house because it shows that you appreciate what you have, but then it doesn't really give you actionable steps. This absolutely does give you actionable steps. And it's nothing too extreme like the Marie Kondo ones. I can't remember their titles right now. Marie Kondo is awesome. Like I love that strategy, but it's an extreme strategy, right? Where you take everything from a category and put in like, and it takes a lot of time. And so this book, How to Keep House When You're Drowning, has like simpler strategies that aren't quite as extreme as something like a Marie Kondo. I liked it. Orlando by Virginia Woolf. This was a reread for me. I buddy read it with my friend Chelsea at ReadChelseaRead and Destiny at Destiny K on Instagram. And Orlando's technically my favorite book of all time. But after rereading it, I do think there's potential that I will find one that tops it. Primarily, this reread, I wasn't like overwhelmed by the book itself. I still think that the book is fantastic. When I reread it, I had just this weird like experience where the first time that I read Orlando was when I was in grad school. And I had this weird experience rereading it this time where as I was reading it, a bunch of people from my grad school days started contacting me, and I just was having all of these like flashbacks and memories of that time. It was a great time in my life. My undergrad and grad school years were the best years of my life so far. And so I love reflecting on it, and it was really cool to get to have that nostalgia as I read it. And that is what made the reading experience so wonderful for me. Not necessarily the book this time around. I did pick up some problems within the book, like use of the N-word and some other little issues here and there that, 20 years ago when I read it wasn't totally on my radar like it is now. So, as I said, I think that it's still a wonderful book. And as of now, it's going to stay as my top favorite book of all time. But I think there's a strong likelihood that I'm going to read something that tops it, or maybe even reread a favorite and decide that I like it better. So we'll see what happens there. A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Sommer. This is an adult horror, and it's about a food writer who is a cannibal. And I'll leave it at that. I thought this was really well written. I liked the discussion of food writing just on its own and how challenging food writing is. It seems like it would be easy on the outset, but it's actually a really challenging genre to write in because everybody thinks that they're a food writer. I liked the unraveling of Dorothy Daniels, the main character, how she just unravels by the end. And it is told from her sort of writing letters from prison after having gotten caught, and kind of telling her story about how she did all these things, why she did all these things, how she gets caught, etc. I liked it. I thought it was really good. Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. This is book 2 in the Song of Ice and Fire series, which is also known as the Game of Thrones series. And I thought this was wonderful. I mean, obviously it's on my list of favorites, so I thought it was wonderful, but it's a tome. It's like over 1,000 pages, but I wouldn't cut a thing. And that to me says genius. 13s by Kate Ellis Marshall. Kate Ellis Marshall is quickly becoming one of my favorite writers. This is the first book in one of her middle grade horror series. I think it's a trilogy. So it is about these 3 teenagers who are turning 13. And every year, 3 13-year-olds go missing in this town. And so they're trying to figure out why that happens. And it's full of like riddles and puzzles, really similar to one of my favorite middle grade series of all time, which is Winter House, that trilogy by Ben Gooderson. That one has all kinds of like riddles and puzzles and word games and things like that. And this one does that same thing. And I love it when books, especially middle grade, I love it when middle grade do that, because I feel like it's so educational for kids of that age. And it's just so much fun for me to read as an adult too. I really, really enjoyed this. Bunnicula by James and Deborah Howe. This is a middle grade classic horror, and it's so precious. This is one of my favorite books as a kid. I remember loving it when I was a little one. And it's essentially about this dog and a cat, and their family, their people, one night bring home a little bunny. And the bunny is behaving suspiciously. When the bunny goes into the kitchen at night, the next day they find vegetables drained of color, and they're just pure white vegetables. And they figure out that the little bunny is a vampire bunny, and so they call him Bunnicula, and it's just so precious. Oh my gosh, it's so precious. One of my pet bunnies is named Bunnicula, after Bunnicula, and it is a favorite book of all time. So that was a wonderful experience to get to reread that book this year. Welcome to Camp Nightmare by R.L. Stine. This is, I don't remember which number it is in the series. Oh, I do. I have it written down. It's number 9 in the Goosebumps series, which is a middle grade classic horror series. And in this one, a boy gets sent to summer camp, and the summer camp is a nightmare, hence welcome to Camp Nightmare. But what made this a favorite book of the year for me was the twist at the end. The twist at the end, brilliant. Spying on Spies by Marissa Moss. This is historical nonfiction, but it's a middle grade historical nonfiction. I tend to struggle with historical nonfiction, especially adult historical nonfiction that gets really deep into stuff, and it just is so dry for me that it never sticks in my brain. I actually picked up Spying on Spies not realizing that it was a middle grade. I thought it was an adult story, and I loved it. I don't know what it says about me that would be my preferred way to consume nonfiction historical stuff, because since it was for kids, they like really amped up the entertainment factor, and they made it more like a story, like more like a work of fiction than some of the adult historical nonfiction. So I was able to consume it and retain it and really enjoyed it. And I would love to read more middle grade history. Again, I don't know what that says about me. I mean, I have a master's degree. I'm not stupid, but history is something that just, for some reason, I have a hard time retaining, especially if it's told in like a textbook format. If it's told like a story, then it sticks. So this book was told like a story, and it stuck. And it's about Elizabeth Friedman, who was a code breaker in her life, and the code breaking that she did for the US government, and it was really interesting and fun, and I really liked it. Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. This is an adult Christian nonfiction, and I read this in November, and it's basically about faith formation and that essentially means like who you're becoming by what you're influenced by. So like everything that we surround ourselves with influences who we are becoming. And it talks about how we can live day to day in a way that we become more like Jesus, essentially. Now, if you're not Christian, skip this, right? It's not for you. For me, I read this at a point in my life where I hit one of the lowest lows I've ever experienced. It was before I had my gallbladder out. It was after my dog and my cat passed. I was in so much physical and psychological pain. I didn't want to be here anymore. And I read this book and it helped me find a new way forward and probably saved my life. So, and I don't say that to scare anybody. Like, I'm okay. I'm in counseling. I'm in all that jazz. I'm okay. But it was a really hard time. And I do credit this book for helping me just carve a new way to move forward, and to give me a little bit of hope for the possibility that things can get better. And they have gotten better. Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This is an adult romantasy and it's very dark. It's actually got more horror elements, I would say, than even fantasy elements. So it is about two sisters, Genevieve and Ophelia. Their mom is a necromancer and she passes on the necromancy ability to the oldest daughter, who is Ophelia. They find out that they're in a lot of debt. And every year in New Orleans, where this is set, there's this event called Phantasma. And it's run by devils and demons. And if you win Phantasma, then you get a wish granted. So Genevieve enters Phantasma thinking that if she wins, she'll get out of debt. Ophelia enters Phantasma to try to save Genevieve. Because very few people survive Phantasma. It's like a horrifying and difficult trial. And even fewer people actually win Phantasma. So Ophelia's like, Genevieve's gonna die in there. So she enters Phantasma with the sole purpose of saving Genevieve and getting her out, because you can voluntarily leave. And in that process, she meets a love interest and they partner up to try to win Phantasma, basically, and to save Genevieve. Is really good. If you like horror, I think you would like this. Like, if you're a horror reader who's interested in romance, you might give it a try. It is pretty high on Steam. So I would give it like 4 out of 5 spicy jalapenos. if I were to rate the level of Steam. And my spicy jalapeno rating system is like 1 is the least graphic, 5 is the most graphic in terms of the Steam. And I would give this a 4. So it is pretty steamy. If that bothers you, you can also just skip over those scenes if you want, but it doesn't bother me at all. And I really enjoyed it. I thought the horror elements were great. It was kind of gothic feeling. I loved the character development, the relationship and how it developed felt like natural and real and exciting. And I'm really interested in reading the next book in the series. The Age of Magical Overthinking. You have seen me talk about this recently in my December wrap-up and my December quotes, because this was excellent. I read it in December. Who would have thunk, being in my December wrap-up, that I would have read it in December? But it is about ways we as a society are irrational. And she kind of goes through all these different cognitive distortions, explains what they are, gives examples of how people in society fall into those traps, and then talks about how we can adjust our thinking so that we are more rational and not falling into those traps. I thought it was really well done, and more than that, it gave me tools to be able to be more cognitively healthy, which is so important right now in the United States. Being able to deduct what's irrational and what's not is a vital life skill right now, y'all. Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This is an adult literary, and Sally Rooney is the author of, Beautiful World, Where Are You? Conversations Between Friends or Conversations with Friends. Normal People. That's what she's written. I love Sally Rooney. And I loved this. This took me a minute to get into. It felt very difficult to get into, in part because one of the POVs, well, let me backtrack. So this is about Peter and his brother, Isaac. Isaac? Is that right? I don't know. Two brothers. One of them is an amateur chess player about to go pro. He's really good. The other is a lawyer in Dublin. And the one's told from the attorney's perspective. The writing is very stream of conscious and very fragmented and difficult to read. And it's because it's her building and shaping him as a character, and like the way his brain works is very fragmented and sporadic. So it's very true to the lawyer's character, but it is difficult to read. And I found that those chapters would pull me out of the story a little bit and kind of block my flow, if you know what I mean, like block my ability to like just be immersed in the story. And it took a lot of getting used to that particular voice. Once I did, however, I did not want this book to end. I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with their story. It basically follows their life after their father dies and the grief that they're experiencing. It shows the relationships that they have romantically. It shows the relationships that they have with each other. It really does a good job of dissecting people's internal mechanisms, traumas, strengths, weaknesses, how that affects relationships with one person, like so how it affects the relationship between the brothers, how those dynamics interchange and interact with each other, and then how those dynamics between the brothers affect like the family unit as a whole. So it really looks at like individual dynamics, relationship dynamics, group dynamics, and she does it so well. Oh my gosh, Sally Rooney's strength is illustrating those kinds of dynamics in her stories in a way that is so real and accurate, and by the end healing. Like you heal a little bit when you read a Sally Rooney book. You heal some of your own inner trauma as you experience it and live it with the characters. Loved this book. I know it hasn't been her most popular one among other readers. I think it's my favorite. I think it's my favorite of hers. I'm not even gonna lie. So do with that what you will. And last, Premeditated Peppermint by Amanda Flower. This is book number 3 in the Amish Candy Shop Cozy Mystery series. I thought this was just a quintessential cozy mystery. So this is set in a small Amish town, and the main character, Bailey, is a candy maker. Her ex-boyfriend is one of those celebrity TV chefs, and so his production company comes to her town because it's Christmas, and they're like, this is the perfect town to film like a cozy little Christmas episode of my show. And he wants to get back with Bailey, and Bailey's like, no thank you. And someone from the production company is murdered. And so that's the mystery in this story. And what I like about that is like it's an outsider coming in. It doesn't fall into that cozy mystery trap of being like, how many people in this small town are gonna die? You know what I mean? So I feel like she kind of circumvented that a little so it was believable. And it was just perfect. Like it was perfectly plotted. There was a perfect amount of time spent on the cozy aspects versus the mystery aspects. Characters were well done. Nice continuity from the previous book. Sets that up nicely for the next book in the series. I mean, it was like a masterclass on cozy mystery writing. So very, very much enjoyed that. All right, those are my favorite books of 2024. Have you read any of these books? Do you plan on reading any of them? Let me know in the comments down below. Every year I do like to pick like my book of the year. So I pick a nonfiction and a fiction that were the best that I read in the year, the ones that stuck with me, the ones that had the biggest impact on me. So my book of the year for nonfiction, drum roll please, should come as no surprise, was Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. My book of the year for fiction, can you guess it? Put your guesses down below. Drum roll, please. Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. So these were my books of the year, nonfiction and fiction. The winners of the award, if it is considered an award, I would encourage y'all to pick this up. Maybe not this one if you're not a Christian. Maybe not this one if you don't like horror, but they were my absolute favorite reads of 2024. And we'll have to just see what makes the cut in 2025. That does it for this video. Thank you for joining me. If you're liking my content, make sure to like and subscribe. If you just want to leave me an emoji to let me know that you're here, go ahead and leave me any kind of emoji that feels like a celebration. Or you could leave me a pomegranate emoji. And until next time, make sure that you continue to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!